Hello, everybody. Today I'm going to get right into it. We are talking about the downside of branding, right? When branding can go wrong, because we always talk about the good things of branding, how powerful it is, how to use it, the upside of it, right? But the thing that we need to talk about, which is like just as important because it can be incredibly damaging, is the risks. I'm not sure if you guys remember it, but there was, I believe it was like a couple years ago, there was a brand that used this hashtag to promote itself. It was like, hey, basically like, hey, I stayed here for the food. And the problem is the hashtag they used was for a trend of victims of abuse talking about their experiences. Understandably, they got a lot of flack for that. They got a lot of hate for that. And presumably the actual human being who wrote that had to issue an apology, say, they're like, sorry, I didn't read the hashtag first, that's on me. And then went through and had to apologize to pretty much every single person who commented, hey, this isn't okay, or some variation of that, And, they got a lot of flack for that then. I still know about that, obviously, and I'm not going to lie, I just looked up when branding goes wrong, and it was the top thing. Even now, a couple years later. So when when you're in this situation, when you are, putting yourself on, but not just yourself, putting your brand online like this, you are taking on a lot of risk. That's the truth. But here's the thing. High risk for high return, right? So with this, we see that it isn't enough to just go out, pull a bunch of hashtags, jump on some trends, and then it just blanketly work. We talk about the importance of mindfulness. I've talked about the importance of mindfulness, right? The importance of branding, the importance of establishing a clear voice, all that good stuff on social media. Well, here's the thing. That mindfulness, if done well, will also cover you to prevent, things like that from happening. And you need to do it in a specific way so that you don't get, you don't end up getting a ton of backlash. So in this context, right, it is very important to do your due diligence, not just for the result, not just for that initial thing, not just for setting up your audience, all that good stuff, but also, to cover yourself, to cover your brand. So the biggest thing that I'll say with that in mind is if you're going to be using hashtags on pretty much any platform, go in, look at the hashtags, look at what kind of content is being made around that hashtag, and try to stick with things that are either generally used or that are applicable for your specific brand. And then, beyond that, just when you're doing your hashtag research, when you're trying to figure out, what are relevant topics and kind of things I can use on social media, make sure that you are looking at those hashtags, not just for the industry, but also the subject matter. Make sure it's not an inappropriate subject matter, because generally applicable or like something that everyone uses, that's one thing. But something that a specific niche uses, you're starting to take risks. And those, we talk. I know I was just saying, no risk, no reward, right? Or high risk, high return. But there is a calculated risk where something bad might happen, but I know that I'm going to get really good results out of this, versus something bad is probably going to happen, and I don't know if this will actually help me. Because what are you doing? You're just being lazy. You're just not doing some due diligence. Really, I'm not saying you have to do anything crazy. Just a little due diligence with your hashtags. That extra 20 seconds, it's gonna make a huge difference. Okay, so when you're formulating posts, when you're formulating things to talk about, just think about it from both ends of that, right? So, for example, if I'm a medical practice, right, and I pull a hashtag from a salon owner, or that's used by salons. I run a couple risks. Now, let's talk about the potential return, because I'm sure that you're going to be thinking well, what if I just do it anyways? It seems like it could be helpful. When you're doing that, if people look at that hashtag, people engage with that hashtag, then they're going to see, hair salon, medical practice, hair salon. And you might be thinking, oh, well, that's a good thing, right? I'm standing out. I'm catching their eye. That's valuable for engagement. Well, that may be true. Or maybe it'll just inherently create that negative experience. They'll be like, why are they doing this? It might feel kind of almost sleazy, kind of cheap. Not cheap, but kind of sleazy, right? They're clearly just doing this because they think it's popular. And yeah, that is common with brands, but at least have the appearance of authenticity. At least you should actually be authentic. I will say that. You should actually talk about things that are relevant, that you find engaging, but at least appear authentic. And then, so those are the big. That's the kind of positive, which is still a risk. But let's talk about the negatives. So, just in that association, you are putting yourself out in a world in an industry that you don't necessarily work with as much, or don't understand as well, and you are more liable to be taken out of context. People are just constantly seeing hair stuff on their feed. That is their context. So you're going from that to medical practice, you start running risks, right? If people are coming to, and on the flip side, on the converse, if you're showing up more in that context, then you're probably showing up less in other contexts that are more appropriate for your brand, right? Because most platforms actually have a maximum amount of hashtags that it will accept before it just ignores them. I didn't know about this, but I found out about this recently, and I still try to be mindful of that, is after a certain point, most platforms will start ignoring or dropping off hashtags if you just, blast them with it. So that hashtag that went to this less relevant audience could have been used instead as a hashtag that's relevant to your audience, the people you want to work with. And also, I mean, especially if you're a specialty medical practice, not everyone who is looking at hair salon stuff is going to need your service. Some of them are, a lot of them aren't, right? If you are doing hip replacements and you do a hashtag like hashtag new hip, I don't know if that's a thing, it's just a thing I made up, you are more likely to be finding people who could benefit from hip replacements, right? A bigger chunk of your audience is someone who's going to be able to use your services. And that is super critical when you're doing this. That is super critical when you are building that online brand. So, the other thing really is, yeah, you do run a risk by using that irrelevant hashtag. You do run the risk of running up against something that is damaging to your brand. Running up against a trend or a subject matter that is inappropriate for you to co-opt for, for follows, or for you to co-opt for a laugh, The internet and social media can be incredibly powerful. They are incredibly powerful. People make millions off of it. But it can also be very dangerous. And if you aren't mindful, if you don't do the kind of practices we talked about, you can end up hurting yourself more than helping yourself. So that's what I'll to end on a positive note, I suppose. Do some due diligence. It will not only help with engagement, help with branding, and at the end of the day, bring you more business, but it'll also cover your brand on the backside, right? On the other side of that. So, yeah, other than that, I'd like to thank you so much for listening and or watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. I've been your host as almost always, John Lind, and I will see you next week. Sorry, Alex, I forgot to do this at the beginning, but here we go.